Hello, welcome to the Positive Posting Conversation, the show about how to have a better relationship with your dog and cat. I'm Zazie Todd, author of the books Bark, Wag and Purr, and creator of Companion Animal Psychology blog. My co-host, Christy Benson, is a dog trainer and anthropologist, and she also works at the Academy for Dog Trainers. We can't give advice on your pet, so if you have concerns, see your dog trainer, cat behaviourist, or veterinarian as appropriate. Thanks for joining us today. This is the recording of the panel Canine Blockbusters with Alexis, Devine and Teresa J. Rhyne. It was recorded at BarkFest, the book festival for animal lovers, in September 2024. I organised the festival to celebrate the launch of my new book, Bark, The Science of Helping Your Anxious, Fearful or Reactive Dog, which is out now and I'm pleased to say getting a lot of attention. More than 1,600 people came to BarkFest. Here's the brilliant panel with Alexis and Teresa. Enjoy. Okay, I think everybody's had time to join us. Thank you so much for coming today to BarkFest. I'm thrilled to invite you to BarkFest, the book festival for animal lovers. We've got lots of people who signed up for this, so please let us know in the chat where you're joining us from. I'm afraid I do have some bad news in that Kerry Nichols is not able to join us today. If you've been following Kerry's Instagram, you'll know that she has a bit of a situation going on while she's waiting for puppies. The puppies are overdue now, and so the timing is unfortunate that just right now she has to get some things sorted out with the puppies because they're not here yet, and she may have to go to a C-section with the mom. So we hope that everything works out for Kerry. And I just want to take a moment. This is the book that she would have been talking about was she here with us. She was going to tell us about Puppy Brain, which is all about the puppies and how to bring a puppy into your life. It's an absolutely wonderful book. My favorite bit was the bit about what the puppies are like from birth until 8 weeks. And we were so hoping she was actually going to be able to show us some of that. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. So she's not here, but she very kindly is still giving away a copy of Puppy Brain to one of the attendees here. So we wish Kerry all of the best. We hope that everything works out fine with the mom and the puppies. And if you follow her Instagram, you'll get an update there. And we will arrange something else with Kerry in the future. So you will still get a chance to listen to her. And I've got some housekeeping. And while I do the housekeeping, I'm going to ask Christy, Alexis, and Teresa to come on camera, please. So there is a recording of this session. The recording will go out after 72 hours. And the reason for that is that I need time to check the recording before it goes out. And there are quite a few sessions, so it might take me a bit longer than usual. Everyone who is here has the chance you will be entered into a draw, since you're here live, to win a copy of the book. So of Puppy Brain, of Puppy in the Wild, of I Am Bunny, and also of my own book, Bark, since this is BarkFest, Bark, The Science of Helping Your Anxious, Fearful or Reactive Dog, which is available for pre-order now. So thank you very much to the authors for doing that. I will do the draw at the end after this is finished. You will see that you've got a chat box. I'm pleased to see people chatting already. There's also a Q&A box, which is where you can type your questions. And if your question is for a specific person, please type their name at the beginning of it to make it easy for us to give that question to the right author at the end, because we will have lots of time for questions. So I am thrilled to welcome our two authors for this session. I'm joined today by my co-host, Christy Benson, who most of you will recognize, my co-host from the Positive Post in Conversation, but she is also an amazing dog trainer. She's a Northern anthropologist and she's a staff member at the Academy for Dog Trainers. We're also joined by Alexis Devine, who is the author of I Am Bunny, which is an absolutely wonderful book. If you follow her on Instagram and see all the pictures of Bunny using the talking buttons, you'll know that that's just an amazing book, which is really interesting to read and fun too, and something of a memoir, something of the science of animals talking, which I found really fascinating too. And it's just a really great read. And it's also got all these absolutely gorgeous photos in it as well. Alexis Devine is an artist and entrepreneur hailing from Seattle in Washington. She's a longtime creator of wearable art before her Sheepadoodle bunny, known as What About Bunny on social media, became an internet sensation in the fall of 2020. Bunny now has over 100 buttons individually programmed with various words that she uses to communicate needs, wants, and even to express when she's in pain. Alexis is a certified professional dog trainer, knowledge assessed, a licensed family dog mediator, and a fear-free certified professional. And her goal is to further our understanding of the power of connection and importance of empathy, meeting her dogs where they are and understanding them on their terms to facilitate trust and promote an environment that supports them as the incredible creatures that they are. Thank you for joining us today, Alexis. And our other author is Teresa Rhyne, whose book, Poppy in the Wild, is a really incredible story about how a foster dog goes missing when with the adoptive parents and all the people who come out to search, and how, like, I really felt like I was with Teresa while I was reading it, like in the moment of sitting outside, waiting, hoping for news, feeling so stressed, worried about where Poppy was, and all the people who came out to help. And it's okay to say, I think, that Poppy was found as well, but it's a really incredible story. So Teresa J. Rhyne is a lawyer, animal lover, coffee addict, wine devotee, writer, vegan, avid reader, breast cancer survivor, though not necessarily in that order. She is also the #1 New York Times bestselling author of The Dog Lived, and So Will I, a surprisingly hilarious memoir about her dog and her both surviving cancers. The sequel, The Dogs Were Rescued, and So Was I, won the Pat Santee Memorial Award from the Dog Writers Association of America. And Poppy in the Wild is her newest book, Poppy in the Wild, A Lost Dog, 1,500 Acres of Wilderness, and the Dogged Determination That Brought Her Home. It was the Riverside Reads 2023 book selection by the Riverside County Library Public System. And Poppy in the Wild continues her tradition of writing humorously about tragedies that happen to her and her dogs. Tragedy plus time plus cute dogs equals heartfelt comedy. I think that's very true. Thank you for joining us today, Teresa.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So I'm thrilled to have you here. Let's just take a moment. If anybody would like to get a photo of us, get your phones ready, because we're just going to pause for a minute with the books. And then that gives everybody the opportunity to take a photo if you would like to. Please let me know when you've got it. Someone got it in the chat so that I know that you've had long enough to get the photo. And of course, if you miss it, you'll be able to get it from the recording.
I'll hold it carried maybe.
Yeah, thank you, Christy. Yeah.
I even have a copy of my book with me.
Let me hold up Poppy in the Wild as well. There we go. Great. Thank you very much. So thank you for joining us today. And we're going to take Alexis first and then Teresa first. So we're going to interview each author individually and then go to a plenary session and then have plenty of time for audience questions. So please type your questions in the Q&A box. And I'm going to turn over to Christy to interview Alexis first.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Zazie. So first up, we'd really like to know, Zazie and I just found this story so interesting. And I admit, I listened to it as an audiobook. So I didn't see the physical book. So when I saw that there was pictures, I was like, what, I missed pictures? So what made you decide to start using buttons to teach Bunny to communicate with you?
Yeah, so I hadn't had a dog since childhood, and the dogs that I had in childhood were family dogs. They weren't really my dogs. I didn't spend a ton of time with them, and I was at a place in my life where I really wanted to experience that type of connection. I was very excited to bring a dog into my life. I wanted to have this sort of Lassie-esque relationship. And I'd come across Christina Hunger, who's a speech language pathologist. She was teaching her own dog, Stella, how to communicate using these buttons. And I am, I guess, sort of frustratingly tenacious at times, and I had no business trying to teach my dog how to talk, but I figured I would give it a shot. And so by the time Bunny came home, I had an outside button waiting by the door for her. And every time we went outside, I would press the button and I would say the word outside, and we would go outside. We'd have a little outside party. And within a couple of weeks, she was standing by the door. My partner and I were sitting watching Netflix or something. And I could see Bunny out of the corner of my eye, looking down at the button and then back up at me and down at the button. And then she lifted her paw and she smacked the button, and her head flew up and her ears flew out. And she got this huge smile on her face and she looked so proud. And I squealed. And we went outside and we had an outside party. And it was sort of game on at that point in time. I figured if she could learn 1, she could learn 2. If she could learn 2, she could learn 100. And though I had no business teaching her how to communicate using buttons, she taught me everything I needed to know about being human, which is in the title of my book. It's been a really reinforcing, mutually beneficial teaching process for both of us.
So our next question is something that Zazie and I are both super curious about, is how authors do their craft, like how authors write what they write. How much editing does it come to all in one? You know, Zazie especially is an amazing author, and I write the odd blog. So, but we love hearing people talk about their writing process. It's like catnip to us. So this book is a memoir, but it also has sections about the science of animal communication, and the pictures, which I haven't seen yet, but I have seen your Instagram videos, some of them. Did you know in advance that you were going to structure the book like that? Or did it sort of like unfold as you wrote it?
It definitely unfolded as I wrote it. What happened is that I was approached by a publisher, and I decided to take a meeting. I hadn't ever considered writing a book before. And it was during that meeting that I decided the kind of book I did not want to write. They wanted something that was sort of very pedagogical, that was sort of like steps 1 through 10, how to teach your dog to talk. And what I found is that this isn't that type of process at all. Communication is so very specific to the individual and to the dyad. And so leaving that meeting, I was like, well, if I did want to write a book, what would it look like? And I thought about the type of book that I like to read. I like a lot of visual elements. I like short chapters that I can digest either in order or sort of asynchronously. I like hearing a little bit of history, a little bit of science, a little bit of personality. And so it felt quite natural as I was writing the book to include bits of all of that. I wrote about things that really sparked interest in me. And I feel like if you're not writing about things that spark interest in you, what's the point? So that is how it came together. And it felt like a fairly natural process, although I hadn't seen many books structured in this way. So I didn't know if people would enjoy it. And it turns out that a lot of people did. So I'm very appreciative of that.
Yeah, like as an anthropologist, it shocks me when people think that storytelling isn't like a valuable tool for communicating to other humans, when it's like, it is the main way that we transmit information amongst ourselves. So I'm like, yeah, telling stories is actually kind of, I mean, it's like inherently human, but it's also pretty important and impactful. So there was these sections about the science of animal communication in the book. And how did you go about doing research for those sections?
I looked for interviews with each of the individual scientists and consumed as many of those as I possibly could. I talked to experts in the field of animal communication, asked for their opinions and their knowledge about these particular studies. I listened to podcasts about it. I mean, I really sort of went all over and picked information from as many sources as possible to get as well-rounded a picture as I could of each of these studies.
So you mentioned in the book that you and Bunny are taking part in some research now yourself. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so Fluent Pet is conducting research with Federico Rossano, who heads the Comparative Cognition Lab at UC San Diego. And it's been going on since 2020. There are thousands of active participants on every continent except Antarctica. It's the largest citizen science canine cognition study ever attempted. We just published a paper. The information in it seems obvious to a lot of people. Can dogs understand words? And more specifically, can they understand words not coming from our mouths, but coming from another source, like a button? And the answer is yes, which, woo! And we've got a couple of other papers that are under review currently, and hopefully we can get those reviewed and published as soon as possible. And there really is no end to this. I feel like we have so many questions to ask and so many things we want to know and so many potential avenues to explore. And the community just keeps growing and growing. The people who are excited about contributing data to this and participating in this study grows every day.
For sure. I'm sure people are very passionate about dogs. So if someone came up to you and said, I want to teach my dog to use buttons to talk, what's your advice? Like, what's the beginner advice you would?
Yeah. So there are a ton of resources that we have. When somebody purchases buttons, or if they have buttons from another company, it doesn't have to be ours. They are thrown into our free button boot camp where they can get all sorts of tips and tricks. We've got a community forum that is well organized with lots of tips and tricks there too. I think Personally, what I would recommend is starting with 2 or 3 buttons that are words that seem highly reinforcing to your learner and that you're capable of reinforcing multiple times a day at the board in the beginning. You don't want to start with something like dream or ouch, you want to start with something perhaps like treat or scritches or play. These are things that are really easy to just press the button and then perform the action dozens of times a day if you want to, right at the board.
For sure. That sounds like solid dog. I pick out all the pieces of solid dog training advice right in that statement.
Yeah.
Position, timing.
Yeah.
Mechanics.
Exactly.
So, Zazie, did you want to keep doing questions now?
Yeah. Shall we go to, can I ask a couple of questions too then? So in the sections about animal communication in the book, you actually are quite surprised by some of the studies that people have done. And of course, some of these studies are kind of quite old and maybe don't meet current ethical standards. Can you tell us something about how it felt to be finding out about those and writing about those?
Yeah, well, I'd known about them for quite a while because this is a topic that has interested me for quite some time. And of course, some of the key things that stick out to me as probably surprising were a human breastfeeding a chimpanzee, a human having a dolphin romance. And these were all in the name of science, right? And I think the biggest takeaway from these prior studies was that it's very difficult to conduct the type of research that we would want to in terms of how non-humans are capable of acquiring language or even communicating in language-like ways with a wild animal in a study of one. All of these were wild animals. They were taken from the wild, put into a sterile sort of lab environment. And it definitely wasn't the most natural setting for them to be in, to live in, to be enriched in. And dogs, of course, have been evolutionarily selected for their ability to communicate and cooperate with us. So larger scale studies with dogs and cats and several other types of non-humans are also now participating that can be done in the home, in a setting with their primary caretakers, in an environment that's familiar to them, that's non-invasive, and it feels much more naturalistic. So that was the biggest sort of barrier that I saw immediately. And it made me feel a little bit sad, right? Because ethically, it doesn't feel in alignment with how I would like to move through the world. But also we learned so much from these studies. And we learned that perhaps great apes are not our closest relatives in terms of how we communicate, or just not the best non-human to be conducting this type of research with.
Yeah, and I think that's so interesting. And I found it especially interesting because I used to teach students about some of this research. So it was really nice to read your take on it and to think about how things have changed over time, really. Yeah. I wanted to ask, out of all of the buttons that Bunny uses, because there's more than 100 of them now, do you have a favorite? And do you think Bunny has a favorite? What's the most common button that Bunny presses?
Well, it sort of changes during various phases of her life. There was a period of time where her favorite button was poop. And she would use it constantly to call mostly my partner out when he would go to the bathroom. So, she'd say, "Dad poop, Dad went poop, smell poop." And sometimes strangers in our house as well, which was quite embarrassing. She's not as obsessed with that button. When we brought Otter home, her 2 favorite words were why and ugh. She would use those every day. And now one of her favorite buttons is medicine. She's much more relaxed. We've recently moved to an off-grid property. So we spend a lot more time outside. She has a lot more freedom and agency to sort of roam. And she's a lot more relaxed. So she just keeps me on schedule. If I forget something, she'll tell me medicine. She'll tell me it's time to go upstairs. Now, this is when we go, she'll tell me work, So I don't think she necessarily has a favorite. But those are some of the buttons she's using most consistently these days. I think my favorite has always been love you, which is just so silly. Because, our dogs can show us they love you in a million different ways, and who knows what her experience of love you is, right? But it is certainly quite nice to hear that from a companion of any sort.
For sure. And You have so many adorable stories about her. And obviously, for people who follow you on Instagram, they get to see video of some of these things as well. How did you go about choosing which stories to include in the book about Bunny using the buttons?
I think the stories that were the most fascinating to me were probably like word combinations that she would use consistently that didn't make any sense to me, where I would be frustrated or confused. And it would take me a really long time to sort of come to a realization of what she meant. And that sort of took me down this wormhole of Wittgenstein's language games and how we can play with language to create our own sort of relational communication between us, like a sort of inside language. And I found really fascinating how she would combine words to express thoughts that she didn't have a specific word for on the board. Actually, the passage that I'm going to read is one of those stories today, so I won't give it away just yet. Night talk sleep was one such combination. She was saying night talk sleep, talk sleep. She was saying this for, I don't know, a couple of weeks over and over again. I had no idea what it meant. I thought at first that she was saying that I was talking in my sleep or that maybe my partner was, but that wasn't the case. And so I asked one of the research assistants what they thought, and they were like, I wonder if she means dream. And I was like, oh, okay. And they said, so what if next time she's dreaming and you can tell she's sort of like running her paws and making some noises, you walk up to her and you ask her, you gently wake her up and you ask her what talks sleep. And so that's exactly what I did. She was dreaming. And I went up and I put my hand on her and I said, Bunny. And she woke up and I said, hey, what talks sleep? And she got up, immediately went to the board and she pressed stranger animal, which out of the 100 buttons on her board, I don't think she could have made a more sort of salient combination. I mean, that's exactly what I would have thought of her dreaming about, right? Some animal that she can't identify and an animal that she doesn't know. And I find it really fascinating that she uses her words in such creative ways, like stranger paw, like an unknown object in her paw. She used that to tell me that she had a foxtail in between the webbing of her paws. Stranger animal, an unknown animal, stranger human, when, new people come to the house. Really, really interesting ways to communicate novel ideas.
Totally. Do you think most of the time you understand what she's trying to say, or is it sometimes quite difficult?
I think most of the time I don't understand what other humans are trying to say, if I'm being honest. So, I can never know for sure. And I really do my best not to project onto her what I want her to be saying. So if I don't understand something, I just ask her to repeat herself or to try again. And sometimes I just leave it at that. I've taught her a really beautiful pointing behavior. So if she can't use her buttons to express something, I'll ask her to show me and she'll just walk me over to whatever she wants. Sometimes maybe I was guessing right. Sometimes maybe I wasn't. But a lot of times when she uses the buttons, even though she's using them less frequently now, the things that she presses have contextual relevance. And as long as I don't have too securely in my mind what I want her to be saying, then she can sort of guide me to whatever her goal is. And it seems to be fairly accurate.
Fantastic. Thank you. So you mentioned that you've prepared a reading. I think the rest of us will just go off video. And if you don't mind, we would love to hear your reading. Thank you.
Okay. Bunny had been pressing sound tug and sound walk several times throughout the day for weeks. I couldn't for the life of me understand what she was trying to say. She would press these seemingly out of context. In a normal interaction with me, she'll approach the board, wait for eye contact, then begin. The same was true in these instances. Approach the board, wait for eye contact, sound, tug. I'd pick up a tug toy that also had a squeaker in it and wave it coyly in front of her. Nothing. I'd grab a different squeaky tug and again offer it to her playfully. Again, nothing. She'd huff and walk away. Then, an hour later, she'd approach the board, wait for eye contact, and press sound walk. I don't understand, I'd say. Then model with the buttons, what is sound walk? More frustrated huffing. I was stumped. I brought it up with Leo and Federico, who almost instantaneously hypothesized that both phrases referred to dialogue. Tug is a back and forth, something that requires two participants. Sound tug could be a conversation. Sound walk is quite literally what she does when communicating with the buttons. She walks on sound. I felt dense for not having thought of it myself, but this was one of the benefits of having a team of experts to sound walk with. It inspired me to add talk to her board. She began using it immediately, pressing come talk and bunny talk, and also immediately stopped using sound tug and sound walk. Now, the last thing I need to hear from my dog is, we need to talk. But really, who am I to stop her from saying that if she feels the need?
I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. That was beautiful. Awesome. So we're going to move on and ask Teresa some questions now, but we will be coming back to you at the end. You might as well stay on camera with us if you don't mind. So, hi, Teresa. Thank you for joining us today. It's lovely to talk about Poppy in the Wild with you. I absolutely love the book. And at the beginning of it, let's start there, because at the beginning you've agreed to foster Poppy, but she isn't going to be arriving for a little while. And so in the meantime, you decide to foster a different dog. Can you tell us something about that dog?
Yeah, that's like, can I tell you something about my inability to say no to a dog? Yeah, I can't. So my rescue dog before the two you just mentioned had passed away, and I do not like not having a dog around me. So even though I go through about 48 hours of after a dog passes away, I can't ever do this again, it's too hard, I always end up with more dogs. I can't imagine life without dogs. And when Daphne passed away, we had one beagle remaining, and beagles also don't like to be only dogs. For the most part, beagles are pack dogs. And so I had agreed, our dog Percival came from Beagle Freedom Project, who rescues dogs, mostly beagles, from laboratories where they've been victims of animal testing. Percival came from Beagle Freedom Project, and I saw a video online that Beagle Freedom Project had rescued a crew of beagles from China, that they were either going to be sold to laboratories or sold in the dog meat trade. So I immediately said, I can help. I can take one of these dogs. And they said, well, all of these dogs are accounted for, but we have another crew coming in like a month or so. I think it was like 6 weeks or something. And so I said, okay, put me down. I'll foster one of those dogs. But that meant I had 6 weeks where I didn't have a second dog, and I was splitting my time between two places, and Percival wasn't coming with me. So I stopped by a rescue. I do a lot of volunteer work with rescues. I do a lot of pro bono work with rescues. That becomes a thread through the book. And I stopped by to see if she had a dog that I could foster, and up walked this just gorgeous beagle. And he had these big gold eyes and the softest fur ever. And he just basically looked at me and said, I'm going home with you, and hopped into my car. And I was like, yeah, he's going home with me, still thinking I was fostering him too. Like I was going to foster him until we got Poppy and he could get adopted. And his name was Roe. We didn't name him. He came with that name. Although we do make plenty of Roe versus Wade jokes. If he got mad at anything or howled at anything, that was Wade, and he was Roe. So the only thing we could figure the name, all we knew about Roe was he had belonged to a hunter, not me, obviously. He had belonged to a hunter, and the hunter died, and the wife of the hunter left Roe just chained up in the backyard and threw kibble at him from time to time. So a neighbor convinced her to just give the dog up to rescue. And so when we got him, he had real bad skin condition, like fur missing everywhere. His tail looked like a rat's tail. It had like no fur on it. He had teeth problems. But he was such a happy dog. He just passed away this past December. I'm going to choke up saying that. But he lived to be 15. So that was Roe. And obviously I failed at fostering him, not to give away too much. And that was Roe before we then got Poppy.
So you had Roe, and then in the book we also learn about Thanksgiving that I think in many ways will be a lot of people's dream Thanksgiving, because it was completely surrounded by dogs. How did that happen?
Yeah. So I picked up Roe on November 5th, just to give an idea of the timing. And then like a couple of weeks after, there were, this is a few years ago, a lot of people might remember, there was a pretty big fire in Malibu. And another one of my friends who has a dog rescue in Malibu had to evacuate. And she had 24 dogs. And she had to evacuate with the 24 dogs. So she went to another friend's house. We jokingly call ourselves the dog rescue ladies, and we get together every once in a while. Usually we just see each other networking rescue dogs. But another friend had a ranch in Lompoc, which is only a couple of hours an hour and a half maybe from where I live. So people caravanned the dogs up to this friend's ranch, and our friend who ran the rescue, her name's Geraldine, she was staying at the ranch with these 24 dogs, and people were taking turns coming and staying with her. But of course, most people had plans for Thanksgiving. But my family lives out of state, and my partner, Chris, is estranged from his family. If you read the first book, you'll know why. So we were like, well, we don't really have Thanksgiving plans. We can come and help take care of 24 dogs as long as we could bring our two with us. So I'm sorry, she had 22 dogs, and then we brought our two, which made it 24 dogs there, 24 rescue dogs in a strange place, but a couple of acres, well fenced. Most of us had beagles. The people who own the ranch had beagles, and you really have to have good fencing with beagles. So we felt confident with that. So we spent 4 days there taking care of 24 dogs and letting them out running on the acreage there and taking turns and getting them all fed. And these are not easy rescues. A lot of them had different medications and everything like that. I absolutely loved it. It was like my favorite Thanksgiving ever. But for the fact that my friend was, a little worried about her home burning down, it didn't. It was fine. But yeah, that's how we ended up with 24 dogs on a wonderful Thanksgiving. So.
We really get a sense of how much you do and your friends do for rescue in the book. And when you went to collect Poppy, just to foster Poppy, it turned out there were quite a few people and several dogs, and you got to choose. So how did you choose Poppy?
Well, when I went to, and the reading that I'm going to do for you is when I go to the rescue, when they came in off the plane, and I went to go pick them up. I was still telling myself that I was going to be fostering, because after the Thanksgiving weekend, we had realized that Percival, the beagle that we'd had from Beagle Freedom Project, and Ro, the one I was pretending to foster, really got along great. I mean, they were like buddies, and they ran all around the ranch together, and they kind of stuck together. And we were like, oh, maybe this is the dog we should be adopting. So maybe we'll get this one. And so we had said, okay, we'll foster the dog that we had pre-named her Poppy. And Zazie, I love the way you say Poppy, because the name came from a show where the woman's, they were British, and the woman's name was Poppy. And just the way they said it, I was like, I want to name my next dog Poppy. And so we had pre-named her, but we decided, like, okay, we'll adopt Ro, and we'll go ahead and foster Poppy. So when I got there, and I'll read you a little bit of that. When I got there, I had in my mind, like, I'm just fostering, and some of these people are here to adopt. So I'll let the people who are going to adopt pick the dogs that they want. And whatever dog is left will be the dog that I foster. That was what I thought.
Yeah, that's great. And so then Poppy escaped from some would-be adopters, and we know from the title of the book that she's lost in 1,500 acres of wilderness. But Can you tell us something about the place in which you were looking for her?
Yeah, so she was lost in Riverside in Southern California, and she was lost in 1,500 acres of wilderness in the middle of a city of 300,000 people. And to get to the 1,500 acres of wilderness, she actually ran across several busy, like an intersection and several streets, and through a shopping center, and then back through the intersection, through like a townhome complex, and into this 1,500 acres of wilderness. And it was pouring rain, and there's hiking trails and whatnot through it, but it was pouring rain, and it was night. So it was a terrifying, like, worst situation would have been had she still been running in the busy street, but it wasn't a whole lot better that she ran into a wilderness park in the dark, in a storm, thunder, lightning, you name it, the stuff that Southern California rarely sees. So that's where she went.
And when I was reading the book, I think it really feels like you're right there with you, like sitting on the rock waiting, or sitting in the cold late at night waiting for her. What for you was the hardest moment while she was missing?
That's a tough one, because there were a lot of hard moments, and I'm going to say it was like somewhere around the middle, so maybe three days into it, when I really started to feel like we're not going to find her. And as you mentioned in my introduction, I'm a lawyer. I still practice law full time. I have my own office, and I was spending 24 hours a day, and I had to start to think like 24 hours a day looking for Poppy. And I had to think like, I can't keep doing this. When do you stop doing that? Like it was the Martin Luther King long weekend. So at least, I had some extra days, but I really felt like there was a real low point, which also I hadn't slept in 3 days. So there was a real low point where I was thinking we're not going to find her. And the potential adopters that had her for an overnight stay, and she got away from them, they were out and they were helping us as well. And I think they had at the same time, around the same time. So I want to say it was like the third day when we kind of all were like, this is not going to work. It seems so hopeless. And like, how do you find in 1,500 acres? I will mention she had what do you call them? The tags that tell you where they are, not an
GPS.
air tag, but something. Yeah, a GPS. She had a GPS on her. So that's how we knew she ran into the wilderness park. And we knew she ran far into the wilderness park. But eventually the batteries on those things die. So we only could track her and know how far in there for, I think, until early in the morning that she ran away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you were writing the book, how did you decide on the structure for the book? It seems like that, or it certainly feels reading it as if that probably came quite naturally from what was happening in the story. Is that how it happened?
Yeah. It at one point in the actual story, in living the story, I actually had said to my partner Chris, after talking to so we used what are they called? I'm sorry, I'm in New York and discombobulated because I'm from California, so my vocabulary seems to be leaving me with my travels. They're not dog rescuers; they're dog.
The two experts who helped?
Trackers. Well, they're
yes,
not
the tracker. Oh, okay.
Close enough. Thank you, Kate. We used two professionals, and that was something I didn't even know existed. And the techniques that they used and what they showed us and what they taught us was so amazing to me that I kept saying to them, "Kai, you guys need to write a book. You really need to write a book. People need to know this information. Like, I think I know a lot about dogs and rescue and whatnot, and I had no idea. You guys really need to write a book." And finally, Mike, one of the can I not remember the word? Anyway, he said, "Yeah, we don't write books. We find lost dogs." And I was like, "Yeah. Wait, I write books." It was like, oh, wait. And I looked at my partner, Chris, and I said, "Okay, if we find her and we get the happy ending, I think I have a third book." Because I always joke, although it's true, that what I write about is tragedies that happen to me and my dogs. And I don't want to I don't want to keep doing that because I don't want to keep living tragedies. I don't want tragedies happening to me and my dogs anymore. But it happened. And so I got the third book. So it was probably the easiest as far as a structure of the three books was that one, because you can't go away from the action too much, because the whole point of the book is everything you're going through during this and what to do and not do. So, but the amount of time she was lost, while it seemed like forever, is not a couple 100-page book. So I got more into sort of the personal things and just that, the concept of community and how the community came together and finding family where there might not be any, which is kind of a theme in some of my books anyway. So.
Yeah. And at the end of it, you've got some tips from, I mean, you mentioned what the experts say throughout the story, but you've got some tips at the end of the book as well on what people
Dog
should do.
recovery specialists. That's what they
That's
are.
the
Dog
word.
recovery
That's it.
specialists. Okay.
Thank
Yes.
you. Okay, great. So this is really fascinating. And I think this is a good time to go to your reading, if that's all right. And the rest of us will just go off camera while you read.
Okay. I'll give you a little setup to it. I already mentioned the part that I'm reading was when when Beagle Freedom Project rescues the dogs, they typically come into one place together. Many of you, their videos are super popular, so many of you may have seen them when they get I'm going to say beagles because typically they are beagles. They're in an undisclosed, not public location, somebody's home or yard or something, and they bring them all in the crates, and then they open the crates and let the dogs out. And for a lot of the dogs, it's the first time they've been on grass or, certainly around humans being kind to them and whatnot. And I had always wanted to do that and to see it and to experience it with these dogs. So the part I'm reading to you is when I arrive on the night that Poppy comes in. They flew into LAX from China and were picked up at LAX in their crates and then brought to a home in LA where we all met to those of us who were either fostering or adopting the dogs met. So I feel like it's going to be a little longer than what Alexis read, but I'll read fast, but not too fast. So near me was a crate that held the mama beagle and two of her pups, though the pups were nearly as large as she was. Mama did not come out of her crate. She would walk to the edge, look out, and return to the safety of the far back of the crate, hiding, hoping not to be seen, and that her babies would do the same. Soon, the male beagle, the howler, trotted over to check on them and boldly walked into the crate. He looked as though he was encouraging her, telling her it was okay, come on out and play. Mama allowed him in, but wanted nothing to do with leaving the crate. Thanks, but no thanks, buddy. Do you see all these people? She hunkered down. I quickly spotted another bigger, tricolored female stepping out of her crate. When I saw her face, I caught my breath. I immediately moved toward her. She had those big brown root beer candy eyes of my Daphne. That one, come see me, please, I thought. I knelt, hoping she would come to me, making our bond instant and clear to all. I did not want to step in front of everyone or move forward too quickly, possibly scaring her. But my Daphne doppelganger did not seem to notice me in the crowd, and I needed her to. How does she not know of our connection? She moved toward someone else far to my right. It's okay. It would be a bad idea to get a dog who looked so much like Daphne. I would cry every time I saw her. I'm crying now. I turned my attention away from her for my sake and hers. Kevin was opening the crate with the two little lemon beagle girls. They came out slowly, very shyly, and almost immediately ran behind the row of crates. With all the dogs now loose, all but Mama and her pups outside their crates and exploring, it was hard to track any one dog. They seemed to be everywhere at once. And true to what we were told, they were peeing and pooping everywhere. BFP, a true PR machine, wisely edits the Freedom videos to not show the massive amounts of urine and feces involved in these releases. Maybe best Chris didn't come with me. I think he's had enough dog shit and piss for a while. He's temperamental like that. That was a reference to our Thanksgiving. Humans and beagles were all ushered into the yard, where it was colder and damper, but smelled decidedly better. People began to trail after their favored beagles, and very soon I saw that my Daphne lookalike had an ardent fan. A couple in their mid-30s had followed her around, and eventually the man picked her up and held her. For the rest of the evening, he stayed by her, petting her, talking to her, and very clearly falling in love. Okay, so good. She has a home. I won't make that mistake. I fervently hoped that they would post regular updates of her to the BFP Adopters and Fosters Facebook page. The Seamus sound-alike had also found a fan. A mom and her young son seemed to have attached themselves to him. And while Mom may have been trying to redirect her son to a less rambunctious dog, the boy knew what he wanted. I couldn't blame him. If you get a beagle, you must have a very good sense of humor. Mom was going to learn that soon. Her son had picked out quite a character. Slowly, I realized that we were indeed supposed to be choosing which dog we wanted. They weren't matching us up so much as letting us pick. I reminded myself for the 100th time that day that I wasn't adopting. I was fostering. So I may as well let the others choose. And I'd take the one that was left. They're all beagles. They're all fabulous. I couldn't lose. No one could. As beagles and people paired off, I saw there were a few dogs still in the yard unattached. One of them, staying as far away from people as she could, was one of the little lemon girls. I walked toward her. She cowered, but she did not run. I bent down to her and held my hand out. She stepped backwards a few feet and then stopped, looking at me. She was tiny by beagle standards. Her head was about half the size Daphne's had been. She was mostly white, with tan patches around her dark little eyes, staring back quizzically. I could see she was trying to overcome her fear, trying to figure out just what exactly had happened to her these last 24 hours. Her ears, floppy but not as long as an average beagle's, moved forward and just as quickly twitched back. It's okay, baby. I'm okay. You'll be fine, sweetie. It's all good from here on out, I said. I stayed put, squatted down, hand out, talking gently to her until she slowly stretched her head forward, sniffing at my hand, her back legs firmly planted. I petted her head, but her bravery evaporated and she bolted away. She moved farther into the backyard, skulking along the bushes. I walked around a bit more, watching as families chose their dogs and posed for photos. I petted a few more beagles, talked to the happy couple who chose my root beer candy-eyed girl. Eventually, I spotted my shy lemon girl again, still far in the back of the yard, up against a brick planter, but no longer behind the bushes. I approached her slowly and sat on the damp brick wall beside her. She watched my every move, primed to bolt. I understood. There were plenty of people in my life I was primed to bolt from. Heck, how many times had I wanted to bolt from this very event? I was able to pet her, stroking down her back. Even with the protection of the little sweater she wore, I could feel her shaking. I bent down and scooped her up, picking her up onto my lap in a quick but gentle motion. She struggled for a bit, but I held her closer, brought her in against my sweatshirt, and held her firmly. I talked softly to her, promising it would all get better. I promised her a warm bed, treats, and some really good food before I realized I had picked my dog. I was holding Poppy. This was the dog that needed me, a female lemon beagle, just as planned. Okay. And it's not giving it away to say that we failed at fostering her.
That was beautiful. Thank you. That was absolutely beautiful. So, one of the things that is central to both of your books is that the dog comes first. The dog always comes first, I think, in both of your books. And I'm going to ask you both a couple of questions now, and then we're going to turn it over to audience questions. So a reminder to the audience, you still have time to type your questions into the Q&A. And if it's for one specific author, please put their name at the start to make it easy to find those questions. So I'm going to ask each of you for a tip from your book, please. If you can share something that's kind of a tip from your book or something from the story that's in your book. And I'm going to start with Teresa on this one, please.
I have, I think, 25 tips in the appendix of the book, but I think the main one I would say is if your dog gets lost, and dogs get lost for lots of reasons. You know, if someone leaves a gate open, if they get scared and twist out of their collars or whatnot. Don't chase. Don't chase the dog. And that's such a human response to chase a dog, but a scared dog thinks, now they have something more to run away from. A not scared dog who's loose thinks, oh, good, now we're playing. And off they go. And that was the hardest thing for us to not think like humans and what a human would do, and to think of it from the dog's point of view as well. I would also say, gosh, call one of these dog recovery specialists, because every situation is different and they're so good at figuring out what the dog's behavior is going to be like. And both that we worked with also said that most of their job is controlling bad human behavior.
Great. Thank you. And Alexis, can you share a tip from your book too, please?
Yes. Still recovering from Teresa's reading. No, it was beautiful. My tip is actually similar. It's about perspective taking and empathy. I think it's so important when we are living with non-humans that don't communicate in the same way we do, to look at behavior as communication and not to label it good or bad, or to look at it through a specifically human lens, to really try and understand what the individual is going through and how to help them feel safe, and not just how to change that behavior. We should approach it through the lens of how can I help you feel safe, as opposed to I don't like this behavior, let's turn it into something else.
I love that too. Thank you. And then just quickly before we go to audience questions, I also would like to ask each of you, what gives you hope for the dog-human relationship? And this time I'll start with you, please, Alexis.
I mean, every time I meet a new dog, I feel hopeful because I learned something new. I feel like part of being human is just learning and growing, and dogs have become such a special and integral part of my life that I now can't stop learning. It's all I want to do. And so I'm hopeful that through my platform, I can help to educate and encourage people to have a little bit more empathy and to do independent research about how we can best support non-humans as captive animals.
You definitely can do that. You are doing that. That's great. Thank you. And Teresa, what gives you hope for the dog-human relationship?
I think stuff like this gives me hope for the dog-human relationship, to just know that, people are caring more and more about dogs, caring about learning about dogs and treating dogs as dogs. And to give a shout out to your book, Zazie, reading it really helped me with Poppy, because Poppy's a very a nervous kind of dog. She loves to just be home. She loves to just be with her people and her and I think we were a little bit like, okay, how do we help her get over this? How do we help her get over this? Instead of what Alexis just said, like, and what you say in the book too, like, we got to just let her be her. And if this is this is what she's comfortable with, then this is what she's comfortable with, and I'm probably not a good influence on her because I'm not comfortable with crowds either. So I'm like, I get it. Let's stay home. And yeah, so I think just I look back even to like when I was a kid. I've always been a dog lover, but the way our dogs were treated then is very different than the way they're treated now, just in that time frame. Okay, that's 50 years, but it's just in that time frame. I think we've learned so much more about dogs and we treat them so much better, although rescue is still, our shelter system is still such a huge problem, but I have hope.
Good. Thank you. And I'm not going to take up more time. I'm going to turn over to audience questions, which Christy is going to curate for us. Thank you, Christy.
Yeah, no problem. I have a question for Teresa, but I'm like forcing myself to tamp it down so we can get to audience questions. So I'll start with you, Alexis. Lisa asks, can you share how you went about teaching high-level concepts like dream and love?
Yeah. So, I think I shared a little bit about how Dream came to be, where she was pressing night talk sleep, and I thought she was babbling. I thought it didn't mean anything, and so I asked the researchers, and they asked, "What if it means dream? What if you wake her up and ask her what talk sleep?" And so I did that, and she responded, "Stranger animal," and then I proceeded to add a dream button, and she stopped using night talk sleep. So she really taught me dream and not the other way around, which is something that I found really fascinating about this process in a lot of ways. Love, I think that, who knows? I feel like when I talk to another human and I say I am angry, they could be like, "Oh yeah, me too." And then we're having completely different emotional experiences, right? So who knows how Bunny is experiencing love, but there's a sort of oxytocin exchange that happens when you're looking in a dog's eyes. So I would take moments wherein I was definitely having that feeling of like, "Oh my God, I love you so much. I can't live without you." And I felt like maybe she was feeling some sort of approximation of that feeling. I would use that opportunity to model the word love you again and again. And I would say it again and again. And some people ask, how is that different from scritches? And maybe it isn't. It feels a little bit different in how she uses it. We can never know for sure, but that's how I went about it.
Very cool. So Teresa, we have Lisa and Aileen are asking about beagles. Was it the Beagle Freedom Project that led you to become a beagle person, or were you already? And then what is it that you love about beagles?
No, I was already a beagle person, and I became a beagle person in the summer between my junior and senior year of college, I went back to Georgia with my father for a family reunion, and one of my uncles was breeding beagles for hunting. So I hate that part, but I spent a lot of time with beagle puppies, and they were so cute. To me, they were like the perfect puppy. Like if you see a beagle puppy, it's kind of like, that's what Snoopy is. I mean, it's like a drawing of a perfect puppy is beagles. And so I thought, oh, I would love to get a beagle puppy, but I was going to law school after, and there wasn't time for it. And then when I graduated law school, I got a beagle. She was a rescue. She was probably like 6 months old or something. She probably was from a breeder, and the breeder couldn't sell her, and she ended up in a shelter. But and what I love about beagles is their personalities. They're stubborn, but in the most hilarious way. And they're really loving dogs. They're super loving dogs and super cuddly, and they just crack me up. But I do always tell people, don't get a beagle if you don't have a very good sense of humor, because they're going to outsmart you all the time, and you're going to have to learn to laugh about it. And the dog in my first book, Seamus, was probably the ultimate of that. That's the first book is The Dog Lived and So Will I, and he got cancer, and then I got cancer, and I jokingly say that's everything I needed to know to survive cancer I learned from my dog, because he went through everything first, and then I went through it. And they're just such troopers. They're just these sturdy, great, and they're cute. That's what I love about beagles. I found out about Beagle Freedom Project when I was on book tour for The Dog Lived and So Will I. I was trying to do events with rescue groups to both get the word out about the book and to help the rescues. And we discovered Beagle Freedom Project and ended up doing a fundraiser, book signing, wine tasting fundraiser for Beagle Freedom Project. And coincidentally, they brought 2 dogs with them, and one of them was Percival, who we ended up adopting. So,
Zazie, we have time for one more round of questions, or is that?
Let's make it one quick round of questions.
These are hard questions to go quick, so I'm good at asking hard questions, I think. So Alexis, your interest. So Fiona says that she is so interested in your existential crisis about dog training that you talk about on Instagram. Could you talk about this a bit and where your conclusions are going?
This is such a big topic. I think the direction I'm going is, how do we truly give as much agency as possible to our dogs, right? And I think we have come so far in terms of, using positive reinforcement and staying away from as much punishment as possible, and enrichment plans and giving choice. But I think there's a fundamental difference between choice and agency. Choice is selecting between available options, and agency is being able to manufacture those options. And I think that's something we don't think a lot about with our dogs. Like we put them in a harness and a leash, and then we just go for a walk. And what if our dogs could manufacture that walk? What if they could tell us, okay, stop now? What if they could drive us like little remote controlled cars, right? What if, and hear me out. Oh my gosh, here we go. Short answer. Because agency increases distress tolerance, right? So I'm thinking of, I have a soft spot for sensitive dogs. 2 of my dogs are incredibly sensitive and reactive. What if with increased agency, these triggers that are so distressing to them become less distressing because they have more control over them, right? They can choose when and where to stop and observe them from a distance and just process that information. They could say, nope, I'm going to turn us around right now. Or, okay, I want to get a little bit closer, and nope, I'm done. Let's go the other direction. Or I need to go sniff over here to process and use some displacement behaviors. I just think that if there's a world in which we can give our dogs more control than they have now, this is a world in which we will see less reactivity. This is a world in which we will see deeper connections. This is a world in which we will have better communication. And these are all things that I am deeply hopeful for.
I love it. So our last question will be for Teresa. From Lisa asks you, how did your relationship with lab rescue dogs affect your life or outlook? Have you seen it impact your readers?
Yeah, they turned me vegan. That's what happened. When I started doing when Seamus survived cancer, and then I survived cancer, and then Seamus got cancer again, I started looking into, this is a crazy amount of cancer in one little household. I need to figure out what we're doing wrong and what we can do to try and decrease our chances of cancer. So I looked into everything. So first it was changing the diet for me and the dogs. And that was great. But then I also looked into like the cleaning products we were using in our home and how toxic those are. And you think about, your dog's down there near the floor. I mean, beagles aren't that big, and beagles will grab any food that falls on the floor. So what are they also grabbing when they're down there on the floor with the cleaning products and whatnot? And that led me into learning about how they test on those cleaning products. And that was also how I discovered Beagle Freedom Project and what they do. And so now I shop cruelty free, and I'm a vegan, and really try to pay a lot of attention to those things, because it's the things they test on animals is ridiculous. I mean, Ricky Gervais has a thing where he's like, it's shampoo, don't swallow it. Okay. We don't need to test on animals. And people will say, what do you mean they test cosmetics? What are they doing? Putting mascara on the dogs? No, they're force feeding it to them to make sure, to discover what the level of toxicity is. So it's nuts. And, yeah, I'm having a hard time doing a succinct answer too. But yes, it greatly influenced my life. My dogs always do.
Yeah, I think we can let people know too that there's going to be more information on your guys' social and sites. This isn't the end of the conversation.
Absolutely. And there'll also be an email going out with the recording in 3 days' time. I'm sorry that is all we have time for today, but this has been absolutely wonderful. I would like to thank both of you, Alexis and Teresa, so much for being part of this conversation. It's been wonderful to hear your answers to the questions, and grateful to you for doing such beautiful, beautiful readings as well. Thank you very, very much. If people would like to support the authors, the books that we've talked about today, Kerry couldn't join us, but Puppy Brain is definitely worth a read, and you can look that one up. We will arrange something with Kerry in future. We talked about Teresa's book, Poppy in the Wild. We talked about Alexis's book, I Am Bunny, and so you have a chance to win copies of those, and you also have a chance to win a copy of my upcoming book, Bark, which is available for pre-order now. I will do the draw in about 10 minutes' time, and I will email the winner. The recording will go out in 72 hours, and it's just left to say thank you to both of you again for joining us. Thank you to Christy for helping me with this, to my publisher, Greystone Books, for some behind-the-scenes help as well, and thank you to all of you for joining us today. I agree with what Teresa said. Events like this give me hope, because it's so wonderful to see so many people here to learn and also to enjoy your books, which are awesome. So thank you very much indeed, and bye everybody.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Positive Posting Conversation. If you liked this episode, please subscribe to the show and write us a review via your podcast app. For the show notes, visit companionanimalpsychology.com. This show was produced by Zazie Todd. The music is Melody from Paris by Studio Le Bus. See you next time.